The Constitution is often treated like a sacred, unchanging text, but the people who wrote it in 1787 knew better. They understood that no society could stay frozen in time. That's why they gave us Article 5, the Amendment Clause. It's the mechanism that allows the Constitution to evolve, to correct its mistakes, and to adapt to new realities. In other words, they built in a mechanism for change. Think about that. The same men who lived in a world without electricity, without cars, without women's suffrage, without civil rights, knew their document couldn't possibly cover every future problem. They expected us to change it, to amend it. They didn't imagine Americans in 2025 would be chained to their exact words forever. And yet, that's the philosophy we're living under now, originalism, a legal doctrine that claims we must interpret the Constitution exactly as the founders intended. On the surface, I guess it sounds respectful. Stick to the original meaning. Don't let judges make things up on the go. But in practice, it's a weapon that shuts down democratic change. Originalism undermines the very amendment process the founders built. Instead of updating the Constitution when society changes, we let 9 unelected justices decide what 18th century language means today. And the result is paralysis. Article 5 is all but forgotten. The numbers are staggering. More than 12,000 amendments have been proposed in Congress since 1789. Only 27 have been ratified. The last one passed in 1992, and it wasn't even about rights or representation. It was about when Congress can give itself a pay raise. Talk about priorities. Before that, you have to go back to 1971 for the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age to 18 during the Vietnam War. And before that, the 25th Amendment dealing with presidential succession came in 1967 after the trauma of JFK's assassination. In other words, it takes a crisis for us to use the tool the founders left in our hands. Jill Lepore in this month's Atlantic magazine argues that our neglect of Article 5 is more than just unfortunate. It's dangerous. Because without amending the Constitution, without change, without the people themselves taking responsibility for that constitutional change, all the pressure shifts to the courts. And when courts grow politicized, when Congress abdicates its power, the system stops working. Checks and balances break down. The presidency grows unchecked, and citizens are left feeling powerless. So here's the hard question. Why haven't we amended the Constitution in more than 30 years? Part of the answer is polarization. It's incredibly difficult to get 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the states to agree on anything. But part of the answer is cultural. We've stopped seeing amendment as a possibility. We've allowed ourselves to believe the Constitution is fixed, unchangeable, that either the courts will stretch it to fit modern problems or we'll just have to live without practical solutions. I say no to that. That's a betrayal of the founders' intent. If we take Article 5 seriously, then the real conversation is, what changes do we need? Imagine a 28th Amendment that guarantees the right to vote and bans partisan gerrymandering. Imagine term limits or ethical rules for Supreme Court justices. Imagine clarifying that no president is above the law. Imagine enshrining an equal rights amendment so discrimination on the basis of sex or gender is explicitly unconstitutional, as should have happened since it has been ratified by over 3/4 of the states already. But whatever. Imagine constitutional protections for privacy in the digital age or for our environment in the face of climate change. None of that is impossible. None of it is utopian. It just requires us to remember that amendment is not a relic of the past. It's the democratic tool we need in the present. The founders knew the Constitution would need to change. They expected us to use Article 5. They gave us a living, breathing document, not a dead one. So, the question is not whether we can amend, it's whether we have the will to do it. Because if the Constitution is to endure after this administration's complete lack of respect for it, it must be allowed to breathe. And Article 5 is how we give it air. The process is hard by design, but the first step is shifting public imagination, reminding people that amending the Constitution is not only possible, it's necessary. So let's do it. If you value this kind of work, consider supporting me so I can keep making it. My tip jar is always open. Every contribution helps me bring more history, more context, and more truth into the public sphere. Have a great night.